Welcome to Clay Mastermind with Don Grant. Mental excellence and industry insights. Brought to you by the Clay Lab, your ultimate podcast for mastering the mental game of clay shooting and gaining exclusive insights from the top minds in the industry. Join us as we dive into the strategies of elite athletes, uncover the secrets to peak performance, and share powerful techniques to enhance your shooting skills. Plus, get behind-the-scenes access to the leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of the clay shooting industry. Get ready to elevate your game, sharpen your focus, and gain insider knowledge from the best in the business. Let's get started. Here's your host, Don Grant.
All right, folks, I have Drew Ricketts here, and I'm really excited because this is a man with profound knowledge and insight and wisdom, and probably going to surprise the listeners with some of the things that he's up to or has and his experiences, and I'm really excited to get to know you better, Drew, so thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What's some wow factor stuff? Like, who are you that's going to intrigue these listeners? Like, a quick summary, and then we're going to dive in deeper.
Well, I don't know what people would be excited to hear about me, but I guess currently I am the NSCA Chief FITASC Referee, so that's something that shooting sports listeners might be interested in. I'm also a professor at Kansas State University. We have a program it's an applied wildlife management program that's also focused on training folks to work in the shooting sports industry. And related industries. And so I teach in that program. And then another big role that I have at the university is as an extension wildlife specialist. And so the main thing that I do with that is either help people who are having problems that are caused by wildlife, learn how to deal with those problems, or help folks who want to produce more wildlife from their problem. And so that's kind of who I am and what I do. And I guess I also coach the K-State shotgun team and help them with different things too.
You guess you do. Well, very cool. So let's just go back, because those are really interesting topics that I want to dive into with you. But what got you interested in forestry, the outdoors, and shotgun shooting? Like, take us back to your youth.
Well, when I was really young, my dad was making a living as a trapper, a fur trapper, and he was writing books about how to trap different critters. And rather than having sort of an experience where I went to a daycare or something like that, a lot of my time as a toddler was riding around on Dad's shoulders while he was out setting traps and checking traps and those sorts of things. And that's what a lot of my earliest memories are: is fishing, trapping, catching critters, and just being out in the woods with Dad. And as I started to grow up, that interest in being outside and fishing and hunting and trapping carried on. Getting into the shooting sports and that sort of thing, I enjoyed swimming, and I thought I wanted to be a lifeguard when I was a kid. And so I spent one summer as a lifeguard, and I realized that you're a glorified babysitter when you're working as a lifeguard, especially in a little bitty town.
Yeah.
And I really didn't enjoy it.
And they probably didn't listen to you at all, right?
I don't know. I mean, it was just a 15-year-old young man trying to wrangle a whole bunch of young kids in a small town. Everybody knows everybody, and that wasn't my favorite thing.
I could see that.
So my 8th grade teacher was a really good friend of Sam and Frida Lancaster, who owned Claythorne Lodge and started Claythorne Lodge. And he knew that they were looking for young folks to work as trappers. That was back when, all the machines there, except just a few, were manual. And so they needed a whole bunch of young kids that could go around and throw targets for folks and that sort of thing. And so he thought I might be a good fit for that and connected me with them. And so I guess the fall of my sophomore year of high school, so I was 15, I started working for Sam and Frida at Claythorne and continued to work there all through high school and sort of on into college. And that's how I got involved in shotgun sports and met lots of people who were really influential on my life back then and really still are, that are pretty heavily involved in shotgun sports, and that kind of carried over.
Right. So did you shoot? Did you start shooting and competing, or has that been a part of it, or have you always more been on the backside?
I've mostly been on the backside. So I shot clay targets every time I got a chance to when I was a kid, but there wasn't a lot of extra money for me to be able to do that. And I'd say that probably once every 2 or 3 months, I'd get a chance to shoot some clay targets with some of the other kids that I worked with and that sort of thing. But one of the interesting things about refereeing, and especially refereeing at big tournaments, is you get to stand behind the best shooters in the world. And if you're paying attention, you're looking down their barrel all the time and paying attention to how they shoot and that sort of thing. And I basically learned to shoot by watching other people and by listening to instructors who would come give lessons. We had Steve Middleditch came when I was really young, and I'd sit on a trap and throw targets all day long, and I'd listen to what he said to the shooters. And 90% of the time, he was saying the exact same thing to every shooter.
Yes, I could see that.
And I realized that to break targets, you got to be in front of the bird. You need to look at the target and not your barrel. And sort of combine that with paying attention to how people shoot and learn how to shoot that way.
Yeah.
I didn't do any real competitive shooting until just a few years ago, actually. I shot my first registered targets in 2016, probably 2016, 2017.
I hate to break it to you, that wasn't just a few years ago. It feels like it, though, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it does feel like just a few years ago. But I guess relative to 1996, when I started working at Claythorne, that's 30-year gap.
Yeah.
So, or 20-year gap. Yeah.
Nice. Claythorne is the first club that I went to ever to a competition in 2013. It was the U.S. Open. It was the first time I set up a vendor booth. And Wendell Cherry gave me the permission to come out of the closet because he had been working with me for like 3 years already and sending me customers and clients. And so he came and he was at my vendor booth with me to support me and coming out, like brochures and everything. But so I'll never forget Claythorne because first of all, it's beautiful. What a great facility. But it was my first one. And then I had stayed in a hotel. I remember driving cornfields forever to get to a hotel. And a tornado did hit while I was in that hotel. I remember hearing the sound of the train outside the window and waking up to things not looking so good.
Sure. Yeah, it seemed like part of having a big shoot at Claythorne is having some really bad weather associated with it.
Yeah, just part of it. But like any other club, you just prepare for it, right? I'm sure they've got that mastered.
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting little aside. When you first said that you started trapping, because Claythorne needed trappers, I was still thinking about your dad. I'm and I thought you were going to trap animals, but no. So this trapper theme is in your life, isn't it?
I guess it is. Yeah. And that's been something that, depending on who I talk to, sometimes I have to explain what sort of trapping I'm talking about.
Which one? Yeah. So you had said that the first thing related to being a professor, you said it carried over into the shooting or clay shooting world, and I wanted to understand that further. So can you go into more detail about that and how it carries over?
Yeah, well, and I think the background and the clay shooting sports carry over into the professor work, and the professor work carries over into the shooting sports work both. So this program at K-State where we're training folks to manage gun clubs and hunting preserves and do wildlife management and all those things together. So when I finished graduate school, they were looking for people to hire for this program, and I don't know, but I'm probably one of the only people in the country who has a PhD in wildlife management and also grew up as a trap grunt, and
Right.
and did that kind of work as a kid. And so I've got just sort of a unique preparation to do that kind of stuff.
That's really cool. What made you decide to get your PhD?
Well, so after I went to college to study wildlife management, and when I went to school, like when I was growing up, I pretty well knew that I wanted to be a wildlife manager for a state wildlife agency. That's basically that's what I knew, and I enjoyed that kind of work. And when I wasn't working at Claythorne, that's what I did. So I worked for Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks during the summertime through college, and towards the end of that, I started realizing that when you work for the government, there's an incredible amount of red tape. And I kind of got dissatisfied with some of the things that come along with that. And towards the end of my college career, I got involved in research a little bit and doing, going out and catching birds and putting bands on them, or trapping small mammals, or counting deer, catching deer in traps and tagging them and that sort of thing. And I enjoyed that kind of stuff. That the background as being a trapper and a hunter made going out and catching critters something that was incredibly easy for me. On the research side of things too, and it was fun. I decided that I was going to go get a master's degree, and at that time I was a really avid raccoon hunter with hounds, and so I just sort of decided that I wanted to go to graduate school to study that kind of critter. And I found a professor who was doing that kind of work. And so I went to South Dakota, and I started a master's degree up there, and it didn't work out. I didn't get along with my advisor. There were some other things going on. And after a year of that, I ended up quitting. And so I came back to Kansas and ended up starting a business doing wildlife habitat management work, pasture clearing, which, living in a prairie state, we get lots of trees that grow up out in the rangelands, and that takes away from grazing land for cattle. It's also detrimental to wildlife in a lot of ways. And so I spent from 2005 until 2010 basically cutting trees for a living and planting food plots and doing prescribed fires and that sort of thing, as a private business. And on the days where I ran a chainsaw for 8 hours a day, I had a lot of time to think about what I'd rather be doing.
So you liked it, but you also wanted to be doing something different.
Yeah. I liked it, but at the same time, doing the same thing every day and being entirely on sort of the manual labor side of it, I wanted to spend more time catching critters, doing things directly where I was directly working with critters. I also had a lot of time where I was alone, and I'm one of those people that's kind of an extroverted introvert. And so I wasn't really hanging out with friends very often, talking to people and that sort of thing. And I realized I needed to be around people a little bit more too. So I decided that going back to school, getting a PhD, focused on wildlife management sort of issues would be something that I would enjoy, and then I could carry that on into a career working more directly with wildlife and working with people more and that sort of thing. Yeah.
That's some great clarity. One of the things that I believe and then teach that you just reminded me of, a lot of times, in life, we're faced with information, like experiences, and you can either like it or, love it or whatever, or you can potentially like it but want something different, or you could even dislike it and be miserable about it. But what we're doing all day long is every waking moment is an opportunity to learn something about yourself and to take the information that you're experiencing to learn even more about yourself. Like, I like this, I like this, I like it. Don't particularly like this, but what can I learn about myself from that? And then turn it into, I like this, I like this, I like this, and you can very deliberately kind of go through your life navigating and feeling like you're more of the decision maker rather than a victim, where a lot of people get stuck in, I hate this, I don't like this, I don't want this, instead of realizing it's an opportunity to reflect, learn something about yourself, and then take a step and not to do it out of being upset, doing it from, I just learned something, like you said, and which I think is super cool. You learn that you were out there by yourself a lot and you would rather be around people, like that's a takeaway. And then you made a decision based on that, on a direction that you could move in that would be a little bit more compatible. Another thing is people think, now I've made that decision, so that's what I have to do. But what they don't realize is you can start moving in that direction and go, oh, wait, I just learned something else. I like being around people, but not 24/7. So then you learn something else. Or, I want to half be around people and half not be around people. It's always a matter of learning and reflecting and then implementing and then learning again. And that carries over, by the way, into clay shooting and competing. Rather than getting upset when somebody misses, it's an opportunity to gain some clarity and then implement, and then learn some more. So it's the same process. So I appreciate that you've experienced that and then implemented what you learned from it.
Yeah. And I think another important part of that too is taking ownership of things that are going on in your life, right? It's easy to decide that things have happened to you, and sometimes things do happen to us that we have absolutely no control over, right? But at the same time, thinking about how we've contributed to that, and then how can we apply that to our life and make sure that doesn't happen again and change the situation that we're in.
And that was another thing I observed when you had said that there was a few things going on, and somebody, I think that you had said you weren't getting along with, and it made you decide, like, I'm going to stop doing this for now. I mean, the listeners can't see your face, but I can. And I got a good read on you. Like, it looked like you handled that well. And I actually was impressed. I was like, wait, it doesn't seem to be carrying any, he's not seeming begrudged or frustrated, or you're not going to believe what happened to me, or this person, now, unless you're hiding it well. But I didn't see that. And I thought that was impressive also. That was cool.
Well, I've had a lot of years to come to terms with what happened there, right? And that was a situation where I ignored a whole bunch of red flags. And because I ignored all those red flags, I ended up in a situation that wasn't very good. And my way of getting out of it was to quit graduate school, which to me at that point in my life felt like an incredible failure.
I imagine.
Yeah. But it was the right decision at that time. That decision is just sort of part of the path that led me through starting a business, which because I ran a business doing wildlife habitat work, that sort of set me up for the job that I have now in a lot of ways. And it's just weird how, if you're willing to roll with the punches and take advantage of opportunities when they come along, how sometimes just everything ends up fitting together.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
It is, and it's so cool to be at a point. So if you're like point A to point B, to be at point B and go, holy cow, that thing that I was so upset about at the time ended up being an amazing part of how I got to where I am now, and invaluable. And it's kind of cool. But so if, for me, what I've experienced in my life is that point A to B happened so many times that eventually I'm like, here you are again, Dawn, at point B, reflecting back and going like, wow, that worked out beautifully and better than I can imagine. But back then, when I was at A, I was mad or upset or stressed or thinking it shouldn't be happening this way. And so that sequence happened so many times. But now I've got to the point where I go, oh, I'm upset, but Dawn, this is going to work out for the better. You might not see it right now, but just go with the flow and enjoy it. Take the good out of it, whatever. And rather than having that temper tantrum in that moment, which again carries over to clay shooting, like rather than being upset in that moment of a score that somebody doesn't want, or a station that didn't go as well as they would have liked, and missing targets, it's like applying the same exact principle. I don't need to have a temper tantrum right here. Can assess the information and know that there's some good that can come out of this if I would allow it. But if you don't allow it, you're just going to keep banging your head and having the same issues over and over again.
Sure. And I think too, another tangent with that and shooting is as referees. So, especially FITASC referees who are traveling around the country and interacting with a lot of the same shooters everywhere we go.
Yeah.
It can be easy to take things really personally, to decide that this shooter's going to try and pull something over on me. And then we've got an attitude about that person as they're walking up.
Mm.
And that can really shape specific interactions, but it can also shape things on into the future. And I think it's important to remember in those sort of situations that, there's so many different things going on. And what happens in an interaction between two people may not have anything to do with the person that's on the receiving end.
Right.
But they're the person receiving it. And when we remember those sort of things in the future, they can really start to build up and lead to some negative interactions that happen over and over again. And it's important to avoid those when we can.
Yeah, you said your position for the FITASC is what again? What is the title, and what do you do with that?
Sure.
Position.
So I'm the Chief FITASC Referee for the NSCA, and on most days, I don't do anything related
Nice.
back to that. But one of the roles is, of course, working between the NSCA and FITASC sometimes to make sure that the rules that FITASC as an international organization are reported back when we have rule changes and that sort of thing, are reported back to the NSCA and then also get communicated out to the referees. I am involved in when a shooter makes a complaint about a referee. I'm involved in those sort of situations. If there's a formal complaint submitted, then sometimes if I was there and observed the situation, I might just wait and see if something like that happens again, or I may directly intervene and sort of communicate with the referee. Sometimes there's a referee complaint about a shooter, which I'd say I've had as many referee complaints about shooters as I've had of shooter complaints about referees. And so dealing with those sorts of situations, trying to figure out what actually happened, talking to the folks who were witnesses, talking to the referee, and then just talking through things. And sometimes when there are repeated complaints about the same person, trying to coach them through how to do things differently in the future and that sort of thing.
People, personalities, relationships, probably some of the toughest things in our lives to deal with.
Yeah, because there's so many emotions involved.
Yeah. So where are you in the whole saga of the FITASC versus Super Sporting issue that's going on? Are you kind of just like following the lead of the FITASC organization, or what's your part in that whole situation?
Well, I'd say my part is sort of caught in the middle. And really, the way I'm looking at my role in it all is to do what I can to support the referees who would be impacted by it the most, and just making sure that they have as much information as they can to make the decisions that they want to make. Because the sanctions that FITASC has said that they will do really most affect referees and target setters. They have come out and said that they're not going to sanction shooters. They were waiting on some clarification to see how all that is going to apply towards super sporting events in the U.S. The initial statement was very broad, but the initial statement was actually directed at a specific shoot that is happening overseas.
Okay.
So we don't know for sure if FITASC cares about local super sporting events that might happen in the United States yet, and we're waiting on clarification about that because the most recent statement referenced world championships in super sporting and these sorts of things. And so I think in the U.S., it's easy to get excited about this kind of stuff, but it's also important for us to remember that in the rest of the world, except for some very specific places, the FITASC discipline is the main sporting clays discipline, and then the sub-disciplines that FITASC is responsible for are the main disciplines. And so they're not used to events having English sporting main event and a super sporting side event and a FITASC side event. And they don't even know what sub-gauge FITASC is, right? Now you shoot FITASC with a 12 gauge and 1 ounce loads. We're not going to shoot it with a 28 gauge.
They're like, what?
So,
what are you guys doing?
so all of that is very different everywhere else. And it felt like an attack on us, but it really wasn't.
Okay. I'm following you. I have to say, as someone who doesn't have anywhere near the experience as you and a lot of people in the industry, but I am a club owner of 7 years, and I, from a mental trainer, have been, involved since 2010 in helping clay shooters. My brain did exactly what you said. My brain does the opposite. Like, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I have super sporting on my course, or did. I don't have it right now, but I have super sporting. I know what FITASC is, and they don't seem the same to me at all from my experience, right?
Sure.
From my experience, I'm like, I think super sporting is super cool. I like it. I like that it creates some variety. And again, from a mental trainer perspective, I had heard over the years things like, oh, I love FITASC so much better than sporting. I'm not saying super sport. I love it so much better. My mind doesn't get as distracted. It's more fun to me, and I've heard that enough that I started to analyze the information. And what I found consistently over and over again was, sporting, you have 3 or 4 pairs of the same exact target, and there's redundancy and monotony, and definitely that sets the stage for the conscious mind to then wander and get distracted or overthink or overanalyze or try too hard. Like, all these potential pitfalls can absolutely happen in sporting compared to FITASC, which keeps it interesting. Different targets, the singles and everything, the variety, the rules of it, that actually keeps the conscious mind occupied because it's interesting and it's not monotonous and repetitive. And so, throwing super sporting in there, to me, it's a medium, right? It's right in the middle to me. It's between sporting and FITASC. It creates the variety, the interest, the intrigue. The mind's not going to get as wandering because there are the singles and then the pairs. That variety, to me, is very interesting, but it's in the middle. In my mind, it's between the two, not the same.
Yeah, and I think that where they are most similar is where we're comparing super sporting to new style FITASC.
Okay.
And in new style, we've got a peg, and that peg has several machines, and there are some very specific differences between FITASC and super sporting as far as, gun mount and super sporting. You don't have to attempt to target as a single before it can be in a pair, and there's lots of differences, but there are definitely some similarities there. When you're comparing super sporting to old style FITASC, they're two very, very different disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I can see both sides of it in terms of seeing the similarities between super sporting and new style FITASC. So I guess
there you are in the middle. Yeah. I got it.
Yeah. And I have an NSCA appointed position, but I'm also an international FITASC referee. And so, caught in the middle.
Nice. Do you know the FITASC ref from the UK named Karen? Trying to see what Karen's last name is. I don't see it right now.
I don't know if I do know Karen.
Karen actually dated my father for a while. She's over
cool.
in the UK. She definitely met him through the industry, like Facebook and everything. But she's super sweet lady. She comes over sometimes, but she's a FITASC rep. Just saying. I didn't know if you knew who she was. And
I've probably been around her.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It could have been quite a few years ago.
Yeah. So let's see. Thinking about the 3 different hats that you're wearing.
Yeah.
Okay. You said the first hat, I'm going back to the very beginning of this phone call. The first hat was the FITASC. The second hat was the professor that we talked about. And then the third hat has to do with being a professor also. What was that? Oh.
Yeah, that's the extension specialist role.
Mm-hmm.
I do lots of different things through that role, but it all involves teaching and it all involves helping people. One example, last night, I drove about 2.5 hours to go meet with a goat producer who lost about $12,000 worth of goats last year to coyotes, or over this past summer. And I really wish that he could have gotten a hold of me last summer, because that's when I could have helped him the most.
Yeah.
But, we looked at one-on-one, we looked at his operation. We talked about some things that he could do from a prevention standpoint to help coyotes not get his goats. But then I also taught him a lot, gave him a real quick crash course on coyote biology, why they kill goats at certain times of the year, but not others, why
I
some
want to know. I want to know.
well, it tends to be that, coyotes are really, really omnivorous. So they eat a lot of insects. They eat a lot of fruit. The main component of their diet that is present year round is mice and rats and rabbits. That's the main thing that they eat.
Okay.
But larger food items like deer fawns, goat kids, even sometimes adult goats, can be really important for pairs that are raising young during the summertime.
Okay.
Because there's a period when mom can't hunt. There's a period when they're feeding a whole bunch of pups that can't hunt. And so being able to bring back those larger food items during the summertime is something that some coyotes really learn to take advantage of. And once they start doing it, they pretty well don't quit.
I
And
could see that.
till those individuals are removed from the population. So that's the other thing. So I taught him a bunch of stuff about coyote biology. I taught him preventative measures.
Like what?
Well, that specific operation is in a part of Kansas where the grass gets really tall out in the prairie. And so there's a lot of cover for coyotes to be able to sneak up on sheep and goats.
Mm-hmm.
And so just being in that area makes you more likely to have problems with coyotes as a goat producer. This producer also was using very, very large pastures. So they were like, it was a 10,000 acre ranch, and his pastures were basically mile sections. And when you have, even if you have 10 guard dogs that are out there to protect the goats in a mile square section, there's a lot of opportunity for the goats to get off away from the guard dogs. It's hard for the guard dogs to keep track of everybody.
Okay.
And when that happens, the coyotes will take advantage of it if they've learned to take advantage of livestock. And so we talked about the size of his pasture. Coyotes scavenge large carcasses and that sort of thing as much as, or more actually, than they'll kill bigger critters. And so if you have dead livestock around, that's a magnet for coyotes. They'll come from a very, very long ways away to those resources, and they'll keep coming back through time. And so we talked about how to manage dead livestock in a way that it's not accessible to the coyotes. We also talked about when the goats are kidding, not having the goats close to where there might be dead livestock, even within a mile or so, if he could avoid
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We talked about the kind of fencing that he had and those sorts of things. And then I taught him how to trap coyotes while I was there. We went out and did some calling, so I taught him how to do that, and then came home. So that's an example of a one-on-one
That's fascinating.
educational experience where I'm helping somebody. Another thing that I do, tomorrow I'm going out to Western Kansas, and I'll give like an hour-and-a-half seminar on coyote biology and all the things that we just talked about. And then part of that seminar will also be teaching people how to trap, teaching people the preventative measures that are important for protecting livestock. So that'll be more of a, maybe 20 or 30 or 50 people in a room.
Right.
And then we also make video resources and put those out on YouTube. We'll make publications for people that like to read that explain all this sort of stuff and that sort of thing.
You say we. Who's we?
We would be the cooperative extension service, and then
Okay.
so
Okay.
the big broad service at the university. But I've also got a video production specialist who I was able to hire through a grant that we received, and so he and I work really closely making videos. The fisheries extension specialist and I work pretty close together, so we sort of consider ourselves to be the wildlife management team. And we have a podcast, and our video production specialist records and edits that podcast for us and puts it out on YouTube and all the other platforms and that sort of thing. So
What would that channel be called?
the podcast is called Fins, Fur, and Feathers,
Okay.
and it's everywhere. The YouTube channel is KSRE, which just stands for K-State Research and Extension, KSRE Wildlife.
Nice. So I've met your dog at nationals.
Yeah.
Fascinating dog. What's the dog's name?
Her name's Annie.
Annie.
Yeah.
And Annie had scars on her face because she loves doing what?
Yeah. Well, she loves getting after any sort of critter that people would think of as a varmint. Tends to be mammals, but raccoons, skunks, beaver. She got in a fight with a beaver that was in a snare one time and has a big scar on her face from that. But really what she's bred to do and what she's trained to do is to work as a decoy dog for coyote huntings. Like I said, the coyotes that tend to cause problems are usually the pairs that would be dominant in an area and that might have offspring. And so they are very territorial, and they see a smaller dog like that as an intruder.
Okay.
And so when we are calling to try and attract a coyote to take out a coyote that's causing a problem, she'll run out there, and she's about 45% greyhound, so she's really fast. She'll run out there and start chasing the coyotes, and then get them to chase her back and bring them up really close, so that it's more. It makes it easier to take out both of the problem animals that way, rather than just get one.
Really neat that she does that, and she loves it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She lives for it.
I have a question, just because I'm not the hunter type, right?
Sure.
But the more that I'm involved with clay shooting, and I have Facebook friends that are clay shooters, I see hunting posts all the time, right? And then Joe and I are engaged, and he's been a hunter his whole life, so I'm definitely exposed to hunting, and I definitely get it, and I eat the food, right? So I'm not anti-hunting, but I am curious about like somebody like you who's into it. You love animals, right? You love nature. You love, I guess I would imagine, the balance of things, right?
Yeah.
So, like, what do you do with these coyotes? And
the ones that are causing problems, oftentimes there's nothing done with them, and that's an unfortunate thing. But we shouldn't kill animals for no reason, and that's part of the North American model for wildlife management, is that when animals are killed, it should be for a legitimate reason. And the important thing that sometimes I have to remind people of is wildlife damage management is a really small field of wildlife management that we don't think about very often. But wildlife management in general is focused on sort of maximizing the positive values that wildlife provides. And oftentimes that means we're going to try and produce more. It means that we might try and make better the qualities that people like about wildlife. So growing deer with bigger antlers might be an example of that. Most critters also have negative values, and that's oftentimes most apparent. Let's say if we hit a deer going down the highway, that deer caused property damage. It may cause an injury. It may cause loss of life for somebody. But wildlife damage management is focused on minimizing the negative values of species in order to maximize their overall value. And sometimes that means we have to remove critters that are causing problems when that's the only solution, or when it's the only solution that will take care of the problem in the short term. And so that's why we also, like yesterday, I talked about the preventative measures with the producer too, because The short-term fix is getting rid of the problem critter. The long-term fix is keeping critters in the future from becoming problem critters.
Yes. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Might have been more than you needed.
No, I appreciate that. I've always wondered about that because it's just, being a nature lover myself, there's still got to be this balance, like humans clearing land to build houses, and then they're upset because there's animals on their property,
Right.
like around here, there's like geese, right? Oh, people get upset because there's geese pooping in their yard. I'm like, well, so what? Like, what did you expect?
Yeah.
You're going to you're going to maybe not take their land, but build a retention pond that attracts them and then be upset that they're there. Like, that doesn't really make much sense to me. So, but there's got to be a balance, like you said, because at times it becomes dangerous or problematic, and then it's figuring out how can we all coexist.
For sure. And the other side of it too, if you're thinking about hunting rather than thinking about removing problem animals, the vast majority of conservation efforts are funded by license sales, excise taxes from firearms, hunting equipment, ammunition, and donations from hunters to conservation organizations. And the people who are utilizing the wildlife resource or the fish resource are also the same people that are funding the conservation and management of those critters. I've run into very few people who are avid hunters or avid anglers who don't just have an immense respect for the animals that they're harvesting. And for many people, the actual act of pulling the trigger and killing an animal is not something that they enjoy, but it's part of the entire process. So I guess that's important to think about too.
Definitely. Again, another thing that I appreciate. If I'm watching a movie or documentary or something, we like to watch the Alaska folks, and they kill an animal, and I could see it. Like, as soon as they shoot it, like, there's this expression that comes over their face, and they just take that moment to appreciate the animal and thank them. And it reminds me, I read a book many years ago about the Aborigines in Australia and what they do, when they kill an animal, and, just that gratitude for it. And I don't know, it's very powerful when it's there and it's genuine. It's something I really appreciate when I see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You had a video recently that I think, so you still have your own business separate from the, okay.
Well, yes, but it's sometimes when I go work at a shooting sports event, I am there bringing students along so that they can get experience. And I'm there representing our program from the university. So like when I go to nationals, we're taking students down there, or I'm taking students down there so that they can learn from that experience because they might want a career in shooting sports. Other times when I go help at a shooting event, I might be taking vacation and getting paid to go work there. And so that is, I've got a sole proprietorship that stuff goes through. So to be honest, yes, I still have a business, but I don't do any sort of wildlife consulting work privately. Everything I do that has to do with wildlife is through the university.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So you had a video that went viral or semi-viral. I don't even know what viral really means. What was that? Because that was a big deal at nationals.
It was an educational video that Danny, the video production specialist, and I put together to teach people how to trap moles that were causing damage in their yard. Because that's a problem that a lot of people have. And long story short, trapping's the best solution. There's lots of other things that people recommend, but you either deal with the moles or you trap them. That video, so I had put one together myself during the pandemic, and in 3 years it got 700 views or something. And we put this video together last winter, and I was going to be super happy if it got like 2,500 or 5,000 views.
Right.
At nationals, it went over 100,000 views, and it's next week. It's probably going to go over 150,000. So I guess
that's cool.
That it's exciting to me that we're putting educational products together that people find entertaining, engaging, and that hopefully they're learning something.
Helpful. Yeah. That's great. All right, so let's go back to nationals. How
Sure.
long have you been working at nationals?
2019, I believe, was the first year that I helped at nationals, and that was I took some students down. They refereed the 5 stand, and I managed the 5 stand, so that I was supervising those folks while they were there. One of those young men is now the sort of second in line as a mechanic at the National Shooting Complex, Drake, and the other one works. He travels the country as a FITASC referee and works on the family farm, and then an outfitter back where he lives. So they're both of those folks ended up working in the shooting sports industry, which is pretty cool for me because I get to see the fruits of taking them and introducing them to folks and helping them get that experience.
Yeah.
And then let's see, then the pandemic hit. And so it was easy to get away from the university because we're teaching online and that sort of thing. And so I that year when we were not allowed to teach in person, I came down and I helped with setup at nationals that year, and then managed a course. And then I've helped with a couple of state shoots and the last World English that was in San Antonio, and this year I came down. I was able to come down and help with setup and set a few targets, and then another faculty member brought the students down that were going to be there to work the event and get experience from working the event as well.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Since Joe and I started dating like 3.5 years ago, so this would be the third year that I've been at nationals with him, or not with it, whatever, because I've been going to the nationals for 15 years or something. But
Sure.
getting to know all you guys, the behind the scene folks. So I don't always know what all of you are doing. You just, I see at the end of the day when you're ready to wind down and you're busting each other's balls and, having a drink or eating steak or whatever. And so I didn't really know, what you were doing for sure when you did come down and what you did do there. So a little bit of management, a little bit of target setting, and then also bringing in some of these students.
That was something that I really have reinforced with the students in our program, is that being at those big events and being a part of managing an event like a regional or a U.S. Open or a World Championship or a Nationals, the learning curve that you can overcome in just a few days at one of those events is incredible. And I don't know, when working at Claythorne, we had our first U.S. Open while I was a kid working there in 2001. We had a World FITASC. Before that, we had a zone shoot. We had a national FITASC. And the camaraderie, the people that you meet, and all of the things that you do in a really short period of time, you just, if you're willing to learn from it and willing to participate, you can learn so much about it. And it's also a fun learning experience too. If you enjoy being around people and you enjoy going and that sort of thing.
Interesting. My brain's now shifting gears into being a club owner. So 7 years ago, bought this club more for like, oh, well, this will work well with my mental training. I was already working practically full time with clay shooters, meaning all the other kind of clients I had became less and less and more clay shooters. I came in more as a business person, right? A person who had many years of experience running a business and knowing how to market and being good with technology, meaning I could implement, processes and procedures and sign-ins. So coming in that way, it was, I could say, easy. I mean, it took time and it took work and learning and all that, but I came in more from that angle. And then I dragged my son into it. He was still in high school, but he came in, lawn maintenance, and then eventually picking up holes, pick garbage, loading machines, and then later, trap maintenance and setting targets. But that was the process, right? There was no expert coming in and teaching either of us specifics to managing a shotgun club, or even, and it didn't really feel like it was a problem at least not from the admin side, because again, that's business, right? But for him, not setting targets that people, of course, you get complainers, which is one of the hardest thing I think for a target setter. Is there's always going to be people that complain, and it just started really breaking down his confidence, my son's confidence. But then the person before him, he had like aluminum foil holding things together. Everything was like jerry-rigged, Everything was about saving money, so parts were made and pieces that should have been there. And so it wasn't until Joe started coming around that Joe was like, "Oh, there should be a little spring. There should be a little spring in that spot, and it's not there. There should be a little brush, or they like to use like weed whacker string. There's these little things that then started taking my club to the next level, because we didn't know there was a baby spring missing from a trap machine. Yeah. And so, learning more from that, I was ordering like a half a truckload of targets. Joe's like, order a whole truckload. It's more money up front, but do it. And you should buy secondhand batteries, all these just tidbits. Yeah. And anyways, what I'm wondering then is your students that are potentially learning to manage a clay shooting club, are they learning all these aspects?
They are learning a little bit of lots of different things.
Yeah.
So, their classroom learning experiences include hospitality, because that's a big part of the industry. They're getting some classes on being a business manager. They come out of our program with either a minor in business or a minor in entrepreneurship. So there's a big focus on being able to run a business. We have a couple of shooting sports classes, 4, I guess, that they take at the university. Those are typically away from the university sort of experiences. One of their first experience is a week-long trip to the NRA Whittington Center in New Mexico, and they get some safety certifications. A lot of the kids in our program grew up hunting and fishing and shooting firearms, but some of them didn't. And so some of them fire a gun for their first time on that trip.
Oh, wow.
We learn about, that the Whittington Center is basically, it's bigger than this, but there's about probably 5,000 acres that's rifle and handgun and shotgun ranges. And so the students learn about rifle and handgun range design. They learn about some ballistics information with rifles and handguns. When I'm down there, a lot of my role is keeping folks busy while the other ones are off learning something, and then they rotate through. So I'll have folks out on the trap range, and they're shooting trap, and I'm sort of giving them some guidance about shooting. We load machines, we look at the equipment and all that kind of stuff. And then we've got a sporting clays class where we go spend a weekend at a club, and it's really a crash course on rules, running a club, target setting, different equipment, and that sort of thing. They set their own sporting clay course each. We split them up into groups of like 3 or 4 students, and they have shot the course at the club before this, and so they get kind of a flavor for sporting clays if they've never been around it. But then we split them up into groups, and each group sets their own station, and then they all come through and they shoot. And so they get, a lot of them have the attitude that I'm going to make the coolest, hardest target I can. And then the stations where they make the coolest, hardest targets that they can, everybody ends up hating. And everybody likes the station where they end up breaking the most targets. And so they get to learn about, all those different ways of thinking about things and maybe what makes things hard and that sort of stuff. Have another similar class for trap and skeet, but there's not as much to learn about from a target setting standpoint.
Well, I don't know if you guys do field trips, but you're definitely welcome to bring your students out to Amelia Shotgun Sports. You have both me, who came in figuring out how to run a business and a shotgun club, but also Joe, who is a master target setter. So if you guys ever want to, and it's Florida. So
yeah, I would love to. We might have to charge them some pretty big fees to get them down to Florida to be able to pay for that trip. But if we can figure out a way to do it, I would love to do that.
It's a field trip. Yeah. I think it'd be great. And my club is very modernized as far as the processes, like I said, and compared to a lot of clubs, they're pretty simple.
Yeah.
simply ran some nice little, I don't know, side by side. No, that's not what I want to say. A trailer down a dirt road. That's what I'm thinking. That's what
Yeah.
I'm visualizing. Well, awesome. Well, if you had, a magic pill, a little tidbit, some advice, some wisdom of your years, what would you pass on to the listeners?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. Be ready to take advantage of opportunities when they come along. That from my personal experiences, I'd say that that's a big thing. From on the shooting sports side of stuff, I would say that if there's any referees listening, remember that that the folks that you're shooting, not that you're shooting, that
Right.
the folks that are shooting that come through whatever you're refereeing, you should be a facilitator of the game for those folks. It's interesting, like the questions on a test for FITASC say, "This happened. What are you to instruct the shooter to do?" That's how the questions are written. And I think a lot of times we can get into this mindset of, as a referee, I'm an enforcer. And really, as a referee, you should be a facilitator. And if something happens, don't take it personally. Treat everybody like people. On the other side of that, for shooters, remember that a referee might have been standing in that same spot in the sun and the heat, and they might be really dehydrated, and the person that came through that station before you might have been really rude. We're people too. And sometimes there can be a negative interaction that doesn't have anything to do with you, and try not to take things personally. Refereeing is a hard job, and don't think FITASC has so many rules that it can't be fun. We've got an attitude that FITASC referees can be pretty hardcore, and really the vast majority of FITASC referees out there are really fun people to be around. They will be facilitators of the game, and they'll help you learn how to shoot that discipline, especially if you tell them that you're uncomfortable and you never shot it before. So give it a try.
Yeah. I like that. I do have to say I admire refs, especially second, third, fourth day into an event. I'm just looking at them like, oh my gosh, like they've really been sitting in that sun making calls for whatever, 8 hours or something. You brought some food, brought some drink, but yeah, they're pretty amazing people.
Yeah.
It
can be 10 hours a day, 10 days straight.
I honestly can't imagine. I really can't.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. I get overheated easily, literally. And so when I see somebody in the sun for that long, I'm thinking, I don't know how they're doing that. So Drew, do you have any contact information, websites, anything you'd like to put out there, products, services?
No products or services or anything like that. But if you're interested in wildlife management content, we've sure got the KSRE Wildlife Management YouTube channel that focuses on issues that especially folks in the Great Plains or Midwest might be interested in, but there's some broader information there. We've got the Fins, Fur, and Feathers podcast. We try and keep that really broad about lots of different things related to fisheries and wildlife management, both on the damagement and enhancement side of things. My information, my cell phone, my email, all that stuff is on the internet for everybody to see. So if you go to www.wildlife.k-state.edu and click the contact link, all my stuff is right there.
Perfect. That's great. This has been really informative. I hope we didn't leave anything out, Drew, because I know you're a well-rounded individual with lots of info.
Well, we could talk for a long time, but people would get pretty bored. So I've enjoyed this for sure.
So Drew, thank you. And I hope to see you before Nationals. I don't know. We don't seem to run into each other out there much, but at Nationals. So one way or the other, I look forward to seeing you again.
Yep. I look forward to seeing you again too, Don.
Thank you for joining us on Clay Mastermind with Dawn Grant. Mental excellence and industry insights. Brought to you by the Clay Lab. We hope you found today's episode inspiring and informative. Remember, mastering the mental game is key to unlocking your full potential on the course. And through our conversations with industry leaders, we aim to provide you with valuable insights into the world of clay shooting. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, rate, and share it. For more insights, training tips, and updates on upcoming events, Dawn Grant and Amelia Shotgun Sports are on all social media platforms. Go to dawngrant.com and come shoot at Amelia Shotgun Sports. Stay focused, stay driven, and keep pushing your limits. Until next time, Dawn wishes you success and happiness on your journey to peak performance and industry mastery.